My name is Simon Bennett, and I'm the founder and one of the project leads of the Z-Attack proxy. And these are a series of training events that I'm giving to staff here at Stackhawk. I've covered quite a few things in the past, and we're going to carry on. And today I'm going to talk about fuzzing, which is, I don't think I've actually done a video on fuzzing before. So this will be a first for me as well. So first thing is, what is fuzzing? Particularly, what is fuzzing in terms of ZAP? Because fuzzing means different things to different people. With ZAP, we have passive scanning, and passive scanning is where we're either proxying requests through ZAP or generating requests within ZAP. And ZAP is just looking at the requests and responses and working out whether potential problems just based on looking at those details without making any changes. Then we have active scanning, and active scanning is where ZAP is actively attacking the application. So it is looking for particular types of vulnerabilities, making attacks, and then analyzing the results to see if those attacks were successful. So that's active scanning, and for us, fuzzing is something different. Fuzzing is attacking the application, but in this case, it's not ZAP that's in control, but you're in control. You say exactly what you want ZAP to attack and how to attack it. And because you're doing the attacking, ZAP doesn't know what to look for. It doesn't know how to tell if there's a vulnerability there or not, because it doesn't know what you're looking for. So for us, fuzzing is very much a manual process. So you tell ZAP what to attack, how to attack it, and then work out whether things worked or not. If you think there's something that ZAP should be able to find without based on the various attacks, it doesn't find it, then let us know. But fuzzing is really, as far as we're concerned, a manual technique. I want to point out, actually, first of all, I'll actually point out that we have this video section. So if you want to, we've got the deep dive series here. All of the deep dive videos are here, which you can watch them all in one place. We've got this new all official ZAP videos page where you can actually see all of the videos. If you've missed any out, let us know, but that is searchable as well. It's in reverse order. You can see the latest ones published are the ones on Zest, which are recorded in the previous weeks. But in this case, I just want to go to the ZAP Marketplace, which also has a searching option now. And if I just put fuzz in there, then we'll see these are some of the add-ons which are related to fuzzing. So we have the Fuzzer. Now this is included by default, so you shouldn't need to install it. Obviously you should check for updates and update it if there are new updates. But there are some extra, there's a directory list, FuzzDB files and FuzzDB offensive, as well as a SAML extension which supports fuzzing. And I've actually, locally, I've installed FuzzDB because it's got a set of fuzz files that I wanted to make use of. So you can see I've got the Fuzzer installed by default. I've got directory list 1 and I've got the FuzzDB files installed. I haven't installed FuzzDB offensive. This actually often triggers warnings if you've got any antivirus, because there's a load of backdoor files and things. So if you try and install this and you get a load of warnings about antivirus, that will be the reason. And that's one reason why we didn't include FuzzDB at all with ZAP, and why we definitely won't include FuzzDB offensive in there as well. But if you actually go to the Fuzzer, then you'll see it has quite a lot of help. Now this help is included with the add-on as always, but I just want to point out it's available online as well, and it does cover a lot of what I'm talking about. But obviously I'm going to be doing the demoing here. So I'm going to start off by actually showing you the Fuzzer, which is always a good start. So I'm going to test it against Juice Shop. I don't want the HUD on this time. So I'll just launch Firefox. And what I want to do is, there is one of the challenges is to actually log in as an admin account. And the admin account is admin@juiceshop-sh.op. And you don't know the password, so I'll put something in there, test, and that'll fail. If you don't want to, if you want to actually solve this challenge without any help, then do so before you watch this video. So I've made that request, And if we now go back to ZAP, we'll see we have the request there, and there's the login, there's the request, and there's the response, which says invalid email or password. So there are various ways to, so all we want to do is we essentially want to brute force this password. And that is what we use the fuzzer for. So the fuzzer allows us to attack anything in any way we choose. So there are various ways of getting to the fuzzer. You can go to the Tools menu and then select Fuzz down here. That'll bring this dialog up because we need to know which request to fuzz. I don't do it that way. You can right-click on any request, pretty much anywhere in ZAP, attack, then fuzz. And in this case, we come to the next dialog you'd have got once you've selected the request, and this shows you the fuzz locations. I don't actually invoke the fuzzer that way either. The way I recommend is you have your request, you have your, so you can see it's this field we want to attack. So I've highlighted it, I right click and then fuzz. And the advantage of this is it brings up this is the request we've got. It actually selects the string that I selected, and it gives us a fuzz location. So the fuzz locations are the locations in the request we're actually going to attack. And you can actually do more than one. You can double click on, or you can highlight any other string and then add, and you'll then get this option for adding payloads. So the fact that we've actually selected something to attack doesn't help yet, because if I click on Start the Fuzzer, you'll see it actually doesn't do anything. It says you must have at least one payload. So we've told it what to attack, we haven't told it how to attack it. And that's what this Payloads button is here for. So once you've got a selection, once you've selected something, you need to click on the payloads. Then we can have lots of different types of payloads. We've got to add one first. Then what you'll see is we've got a selection of different types of payloads. And I'm actually going to start with a file fuzzer. I'll talk about all of these in a bit. And I'm going to go to FuzzDB and wordless user passwords. I'm actually going to go delve down and select one particular list, which I know the relevant password is in. I could have done all the passwords, it would just take longer. So I have told, actually, and we'll have a look at that. You'll see it actually shows, in this case, it shows all of the payloads. So you can see exactly what you're going to get, but it did show a preview as well, I think. So okay that, and I will start the fuzzer. And we now get this new tab down here, and you'll see it is chugging along. And we can see there's a progress bar. There's only one going at the moment. If there's more than one, you can do as many as you like at any one time. It would show you more, and you could select whichever one you wanted. You can see the number of messages sent. And we see things like the ID, the message type, the code. This is the HTTP response code. How long it took, the size of the header, the response body, and you see the payloads churning down there. Now, in this particular case, we know that we've got 401, that's unauthorized, so there's a good chance we'll actually get a different code if it's successful. So I'm going to sort by code and go to the top, because anything which is and they are 200 or something like that, to whatever, will appear before this. And one thing you can see here is we've got this reflected. So if you select any of these, you can actually see the request and response. You can see there's the invalid, and if we select this one, we'll see that the reason we had this state of reflected is because the payload, which is password, is actually reflected in the response. That doesn't mean that this particular request or this particular payload has been successful. It doesn't mean there's a vulnerability. All it means is that that payload was reflected in the response. So it's telling you that is informational. And if we hopefully won't have to wait too much longer. So as you can see here, we've actually had a 200 that appear at the top. So I can stop my fuzzer now, and we can see that the request, the password was admin123. which was the payload here as well. And the response was an authentication token. So we have successfully found the admin password, but in this particular case, it carried on going because ZAP didn't know what we were looking for. But we can see that the response size is significantly different. We've got a different response code. The time it took is fairly similar, so we can't do any timing-based attacks. But that shows us what, this is how we can tell that this one was successful in this particular case. Obviously, getting a 200 code doesn't mean success in all cases. In some cases, you might be looking for 401. There's a whole, it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. Now, one of the other things we can do is we can actually search these things. So if we go to the search page, and what I'm going to search for is invalid, but in this case, I'm going to inverse the search, so I don't want to find invalid. And you can see we can search we can search everything, just URL, request response headers, but these are the things in the standard history. What I want to do is search the HTTP fuzz results. And if I do that, then we find one result, which is this login one, the successful login, where we supplied the admin123, and that is a response. And nothing's highlighted here because we're looking for the lack of invalid rather than the presence of it. But if we just put in authentication, then we should get that highlighted. So that's the fuzz at a very high level. You're throwing things at a particular request, and then you've got to work out whether it works or not. And you can do that via any information here or via searching. But there is a little bit more to it than that. So let me just go to a request and click on fuzz. So one of the things I've mentioned is you can actually fuzz more than one thing. So we can add things. Obviously, then we've got to, in this particular case, we go in this way. It asks us to supply some payloads. And what I'll do is just walk you through some of these payloads after a sip of tea. So you've got different types of payloads. The first one that comes up with is strings. And in this case, you basically just put in whatever strings you want. So you can have multi-line strings. I can't actually remember what the format is. But basically, if you don't select that, then it's one payload per line. Then we have this empty payload, which may seem a bit strange because you can say how many repetitions. And this will basically repeat the request how many times you want. And the reason we do this is because you might be doing some processing via scripts. So if you're actually just processing in scripts, you might want to generate different payloads. The script might handle all of that. So in this case, you just want ZAP to make 10 or 1,000 or 100,000 requests for you. So that's why you might use the empty or null payload. Then we have the file payload, and this means you're actually selecting a local file. So it's a file that you've decided on that you want to use, and you give us the character encoding, whether you want to submit every line or every payload, or if not, if there's a limit where there's a comment token, whether you want to ignore empty lines, ignore the first line, and it'll show you a preview as well. Then we have file fuzzers, which I did just show you. And these are the fuzzing files that are included with ZAP. So either they're included with ZAP or they've been installed. So I installed FuzzDB, and that's why I've got there. So if you haven't got FuzzDB installed, then you wouldn't see that. And if you select anything, you'll actually see all of the payloads, or if not all of them, a set of all the payloads. And if I unset some of these and select different ones, you'll see this is the type, and you see we actually got different files here. So it's just giving you an idea of the kind of payloads that you'll get. And again, so what we have is these, so something like FuzzDB and JBroFuzz, they've loads of different files, but they're organized in different ways. So things like payloads for HTTP, where they've got the user agents, the methods, different headers, you're trying to attack integers. So they're organized in different ways. So you need to kind of understand how you want to attack your application, and then choose a fuzzer that you think will do the job. So what I did before is I actually selected one of these word list ones, and so these are just lists of passwords. So you got passwords for particular databases, users for default passwords for different things. So it's all very much whatever's been found that whoever created these lists has found and put them in. So we've got Oracle ones here. So it's up to you to kind of find what you're looking for and then select whatever you want. So I'll carry on going through the payloads. We have a JSON payload, and this actually generates different types of JSON style payloads. Numbers, so you can actually generate as many numbers as you want. So we'll just show from. Don't want to increment. So if you want to go up in threes, so you can generate any payloads, any number payloads that way. Then we've got this regex one, which means we'll generate payloads based on regex expressions. So I've kind of got an example expression here, which I need to add to the help because I had to kind of work this out first time. So here we're saying any lowercase letter, any uppercase letter, and any number between 4 and 8 times. And if you just, by default, it will do an order, but if I put random order and generate preview, then you'll see we start getting random passwords between 4 and 8 characters in length based on those characters. And so this might be a case where you actually need to have particular, so maybe you actually need, you have to have something like that, then you have to have a minus, and then you have to have A to Z or something like that. So you can see you can generate kind of any combination of things you like based on regex expressions. So if there's particular patterns where you need certain characters in there, slashes, or in certain positions, you can put those in. So you can do this all via regex expressions. Then we have scripts. So we can generate payloads by scripts, and that means you can generate anything you like. And I will show you some scripts later. And I showed the scripts one as well. And remember, these payloads can be combined. So you can actually fuzz a particular location, and then you can add more payloads on at the end or payloads at the beginning or anything like that. So it's very flexible on the kind of things you do. I will show you some of the options here. So we've got, if you start getting errors back, you can limit, you can retry a certain amount of times, then limit in maximum number of errors in case your server goes down. It's got maximum number of errors there. Whether we actually go depth first on the payload or across all of the payloads. And choices on threads and a delay. So you can put a delay in if your server falls over, if you attack it too quickly, but obviously that will take significantly longer. Then the next thing is message processors, and so what these do is these process the requests and responses, and you'll see we actually have 2 put in by default. And so the first one is updating the content length. So by default, we will, so the fuzzer itself doesn't worry about the content length in the request header. It's this processor that handles it. So if you don't want the content length updated for some reason, because you're trying to trick the server in some way, then remove that that payload processor. But we think most people will want it. And this one actually puts in that reflected state is added by this processor. So all that's doing is just looking for the payload in the response, and if so, it's telling you it's reflected. Now we do have some other message processors, we have script processors again. So I will show you some of those later. Then we've got the payload one, the request content. Then we've got the reflection, content length, which you've seen before, and a tag creator. So we can actually tag requests, and we can either match something on a regex and tag it in a certain way, or we can extract something to use as a tag. And then we will actually tag those requests, so you can search for tags. So that's another way of kind of categorizing things. We actually do have another couple of processes which aren't shown by default, which I will talk about in a bit. So we also have, so you'll see here, we've got processes here as well. And if I go to the payloads and let's just add some of those there. And if we actually select a payload, we've got processors here as well. So these are a different source of processor. These are payload processors. So the message processors actually allow you to look at and manipulate the requests and responses. The payload processors allow you to manipulate the payloads. So what can you do? Well, we've got a whole load of encoding and escaping and unescaping and hashing and trimming. So if you say have so something like you can base encode, base decode, JavaScript escape, unescape, expand. Say you actually have a field where there's a minimum length. Maybe surname's got to be a minimum length. You can actually say, right, we will add more characters. You can put whichever characters you want to pad it up to up to 8. So there you go. I've just padded it. That's at the beginning. You can put it at the end if you like. So that means that your payloads will always be at least 8 characters long. And you can add as many of these as you need. So if you actually need to hash something, then expand it, then URL encode it, whatever, you can add as many as you need. And of course, we've got script ones as well, which again, I will show you in a very short period of time. Now, these payload processors either apply to the specific payload you've selected, and therefore you can have different sets of payloads and associate different processors with those payloads. Or if you go to this screen here, then you get the same dialog, but this actually applies to all of them. So if you want to apply the same processes to all of your payloads, then do it in this dialog here rather than in the one associated with the individual payloads. I did mention that there are a couple of other payload message processors that aren't shown by default. So what I'm going to do, I'll show one of them for you. So this time I'm going to go to Budget, launch the browser, and I'm going to the Contact Us page and submit some feedback. So I'll go to the post request and I will click on the comments and I will fuzz. And if we go to message processors, you'll see we've got this new anti-CSRF token refresh processor. So this was added automatically because ZAP noticed that we have an anti-CSRF token in there. So this means if I add a set of payloads, and so I didn't mean to add that one. What I wanted to do was set the payload there and start the fuzzer. Then what we should see is if we select the requests, we'll see the anti-CSRF token changing each time. And kind of because the body was looking kind of similar, hopefully this means that it was actually all working. So it'll actually specify, it'll go and request the anti-CSRF token before making the request.
When you were fuzzing before and that had the anti-CSRF token, the anti-CSRF message processor got added in automatically. So are those all defined in the HTTP processors you just pointed out? And what's informing ZAP to add that message processor?
So if you go to the ZAP options, there is something called anti-CSRF tokens. So this is the list of all the anti-CSRF tokens we know about. You can add more. So basically, ZAP is just looking for any of those tokens in a request. So if it finds one of those, then it goes, this is probably anti-CSRF token, and we'll try and handle it accordingly.
All right, that makes sense.
And we use that in active scanning as well. So because otherwise we'd end up not stacking forms correctly most of the time.
All right, very smart. You're keeping a list of all these. Cool.
Yeah, and if you find any that aren't in that list, then let us know. I mean, obviously you can add your own in, but we'll try and keep this up to date with all the common ones we hear about.
Cool, thank you.
No problem. Now there is another processor, and that's for a user message processor, and that means if you have a user defined, then you have the option to actually fuzz as that particular user. But I haven't got any user set, so both of those processors will only get added if the conditions are right. So what I want to do now is talk about the scripts, and for that I'm going to go to the community scripts repo. And we have different types of scripts. So I mentioned the HTTP Fuzzer processor. Now we actually have a WebSocket Fuzzer processor as well, because we can fuzz WebSockets. But I realized I haven't talked about WebSockets here, so that'll be a future session. And I'll talk about fuzzing then, fuzzing WebSockets that is. But if I have a look at the HTTP Fuzzer processor, we'll see we've got the JavaScript template here. So you'll see we have a function for processing the message and producing a result as well. And you can see it's got a whole load of help here. So you've got utility methods for getting payloads, for stopping the fuzzer, changing the error counts, actually send message, add message to results. You can do all sorts of things. And you can see here that in this example, we're actually adding a header, and you can process results as well. And one of the things you can see you can do is actually add a custom state. So if you want to add a state here, so instead of just reflected, you want to put your own state in here, then you can do that via a script. And we'll see we've actually got a set of example scripts. So you can add messages to the sites tree. By default, we don't add the fuzz results to the sites tree because we're kind of expecting you to just be throwing random stuff at it, and you don't want to see that in the sites tree. But if you do, you can just add that script. We can actually filter by HTTP status code, so actually only showing the results that match a particular status code. You can change the user agent while fuzzing. This one you can actually add a random X forwarded for header if you want, and one here which is showing the differences. So shows the differences between the original response and the response you get for when you're fuzzing. So those are the HTTP fuzzer processors, so the kind of message processors for HTTP. Then we have payload generators. So what you can do is you can write a script to generate whatever payloads you want. And you have to kind of say how many payloads you're going to generate. And, has next and then next. So, this is a pretty simple way. Often we've got Groovy template as well. So we've got one here for generally associated fields. I think that uses, so you need a local file for that. And we've got one for brute forcing as well. I think that also uses a local file. But you can write whatever script you want to generate, whatever kind of payloads you need. And we have payload processors as well. And so for this, basically you get called with the payload. So your script will be called before we make any attacks. And you can see we've got a whole load of payload processors. Looks like they're taken from SQL map. So masking apostrophes, double encoding characters, character encoding, equal to like lowercase percentage random case, all sorts of things, deflate, zip. So you can use scripts to process any of the payloads. So basically, with scripts, you can do anything to the messages when they're sent and received. You can generate any payloads you want, and you can process those payloads in any way you want. So I will quickly show you the source code, or where the source code is held. That is in ZAP Extensions under Add-ons, and then we go down to Fuzz, and so it'll be under Source, Main, Fuzz. And I must admit, this is one of the more complicated ZAP add-ons. So if you're looking to get started with ZAP development, this might not be the best one to start with, because it is complicated. It does a lot, and it's got quite a lot of UI around it. But if you want to get involved with it, please do. Certainly don't want to put people off. It's just a kind of warning that this one is non-trivial. There are easier places to start, but if it's what you want to do, then definitely go for it. And that is everything I was going to cover for fuzzing. Any more questions on anything I've gone through?
Are all these endpoints exposed API, like every bit of function?
Good question. No. So we do want the API to cover all of ZAP functionality. There's no doubt about that. But historically, it doesn't. And the fuzzer is something we've traditionally seen as a manual process, so it's been further down our list. What I can show you is I go to ZA proxy, and this is where all of the issues are. Even for, we've turned off issues for ZAP extensions. We have a look for label, and we have a tracker label. So, and somewhere lower down, it'll be so extend API to cover all ZAP functionality. And we have down here, so force browse fuzzing. So that is the issue for fuzzing. So the port scanner, replacer we've done, WebSockets we've done, applications we haven't done. So we actually have, there's quite a lot of talk on this particular issue because it's a non-trivial thing. So we've kind of tried to work out how we would provide an API for it because there's a lot going on. But yeah, it's something we want to do. It's just we haven't got around to doing it yet. So if anyone wants to help us out with that, then that would be much appreciated.
Sounds good. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you very much. And if you're watching this on YouTube afterwards and you have any questions, then please just ask questions in the comments. Until next time.